And as I mentioned, we are going to have a Q&A after the panel and after you've heard from our speakers. You'll be able to ask them whatever questions you like. But if you'd prefer to ask questions as they come to you, if you're like me and you think of something really interesting you want to ask, and then we move on to the next speaker and you're like, oh, what was it I want to ask? You can pop them in the chat box, and my colleague Roz will ask them on your behalf at the end of the session. The chat box is just at the bottom of your screen with a little speech mark that says chat on it. If you click on that, it will bring up the chat box. So do feel free to fill that up during the session or during the Q&A. So now that's all out the way and we know what we're doing. Although, to be honest, do we know what we're doing? It's Zoom, who knows what might happen, but we won't hold our breaths, but we'll try our best. But thank you so much. So the reason that many of you are here is because you have supported Shelter and you've supported us at a time when we really need your help. I have been completely blown away by how inventive people have been, coming up with all sorts of weird, wonderful and wacky fundraising ideas that they've been able to do in isolation and while social distancing. We are so grateful that people have done that so that we can continue to help people who are facing homelessness and bad housing during this pandemic and way beyond that, of course. So thank you so much for that, and you will hear from our panelists the work that they do. And we would not be able to do that work if we didn't have the support of people like you. So please do bear that in mind as you're hearing about the work they do. Obviously, this public health crisis has collided head-on with an existing housing emergency, and our homes have become really important to us. We've been working from home, we've been spending a lot more time at home. Home is where we were told to be to stay safe. But the reality is that before this outbreak, there were millions of people across the country who didn't have a safe and secure place to call home. And in the past few months, while this has been going on, we've seen an increase in people needing to come to us for urgent support and housing advice. And we've been defending the right to a safe home for people for decades. But right now, it's more important than ever. And thanks to the incredible generosity of everybody here today, and of course the dedication of our fantastic frontline teams, we've been able to rise to that challenge, and we've adapted how we deliver our support in the face of the pandemic, and we're making sure that everybody who's facing an urgent housing crisis or issue or homelessness during this outbreak can access help. We have a helpline, I'm sure many of you know, and that is open 365 days a year. We've seen a big increase in calls to that recently, and the teams there really have gone above and beyond to make sure that they can help as many people as possible who call up the phone line or contact us on web chat. And an example of that, somebody who's gone extremely above and beyond, is Nadeem. So Nadeem, he usually works in Sheffield in our helpline centre, taking calls from people who need help. But he was actually visiting family in Pakistan when coronavirus kicked off, and he set up an office on a rooftop in Pakistan in his family's home, and has been talking to people on our web chat, helping them with their housing issues from there. So that's just one example of how hard our helpline advisors work, and across the board they've been working tirelessly, and every day we hear from people who show us why our services are needed now more than ever. And I know that we're all feeling the impact of coronavirus on our own lives, and obviously the crisis is continuing to unfold and we're continuing to adapt. But with the support that you give, Shelter will continue to defend the right to a safe home and be there for anybody who needs us during this pandemic and way beyond. So thank you so much, and it gives me absolute pleasure to be able to introduce three people who work so hard to make sure that we continue our work. So I have got Tyrone, Liz and Lyndsey here today. So Tyrone has worked for Shelter for 6 years in a number of roles. He actually started out on that helpline in Sheffield, and now he is our London community organiser, and he helps the communities all around London fight back against bad housing. So we'll be hearing from him. And then we've also got Liz Norris. So Liz is a service manager in Manchester, and she's here today. She's going to tell us about a project she's been working on since 2018. It's really incredible, her team. They work on the Entrenched Rough Sleepers service, and they've helped hundreds of rough sleepers all across Greater Manchester to find accommodation, and they continue to support them afterwards to really help them get their lives back on track and get into a good place. And they have, you know, full on wraparound support from the team. So looking forward to hearing from Liz about what they do. And then hopefully, we've had a few technical issues, but hopefully we will also have Lyndsey here in a bit. So Lyndsey has been involved in our Time for Change project up in Edinburgh since 2019. And the project seeks to involve people who have lived experience of homelessness or poor housing. And Lyndsey is absolutely fantastic. She's one of our most active peers. She's always getting involved in different activities, both on her own and with other Time for Change peers. And sharing her experience has allowed others to really better understand the issues that people who are homeless face. But as well as that, she's been able to encourage other people to get involved with the work that we do and to get involved in the project. So looking forward to hearing from her. So welcome, Liz, Tyrone, and Lyndsey. I'm not sure if she's here yet, but we will see that. But I'm going to start with Tyrone. So welcome, Ty. Thank you for coming along and taking time out this morning.
No worries.
So Ty works as our community organiser for London. So I know many of you are probably thinking, what is community organising? So Ty, can you tell us what community organising is, please?
Yeah, of course. And just for a bit of clarity, it might look like I'm looking away, but I've just got two screens, but I always like to quickly explain so it just makes a bit more sense as to why I'm looking in the other direction. But community organising, yeah, and I'll try to be relatively brief because you could talk for a while about it. But I mean, community organising is a new programme for Shelter, and certainly a new way of working for Shelter, and it's been implemented as part of our sort of new strategy for seeking change. But what exactly is community organising is a question I still get asked a lot, even by my colleagues within Shelter as well, because it is still something that we're as it is so new, we're all working to understand. But community organising essentially is the work of bringing people together to take action around their common concerns and overcome, injustices. And in the context of Shelter, is to fight back against bad housing. And what the community organisers do is we sort of reach out, listen, and try and connect and motivate people to build their own collective power. So we do that by reaching out to already established local community groups, other local institutions where there may be leaders who can help with that fight back against bad housing. But then also just engaging with the people who use our services and anybody who has that lived experience of homelessness or bad housing to sort of come together and sort of build a movement to begin to fight back. And the whole idea of community organising is to sort of return that power back to the people. There's been a very long imbalance of power in which, now the everyday citizen or resident doesn't hold that power, or often isn't aware that they hold that power to seek to make change. So this program of community organising is to really bring that power back to those residents and back to the people, so they have the agency to be able to challenge bad housing, challenge their landlords, challenge their councils, whoever it may be, so they can ensure they get adequate housing and fair housing. And there's sort of different ways that we organise within Shelter, but essentially we look to run one-to-one meetings with residents and people affected, and then we'd look to move into house meetings or Zoom meetings as they are nowadays, where we'd get maybe we just had 10 one-to-ones with people who all have bad housing, and then we'll all meet together as 10, so we can really begin to understand how can we affect change. That, and part of that is mapping out, where is the power, where does the power lie. So maybe it might be an issue around a council estate regeneration that a certain group might be trying to stop, and if they do that, then we'll help them map out who do we need to influence, what tactics can we do to try and create change. And then as part of that, it's bringing people together, and it builds that local power. And when we do that, we can sort of build local coalitions with all these different community groups that are all eager to sort of seek fair housing. And once you do that, and once there's a number of different groups that are there over time, that will just essentially start a local movement where tenants and residents have their voices heard and have that power to seek change. And there's sort of three big different ways that we look to organise, which is standalone local campaigns where we'll just work with whatever we are told happens on the ground. It doesn't even have to be anything related to what shelter would usually do, because it's about what the people need and desire, and we'll just do standalone campaigns based on what it is that they tell us they're seeing. But then also part of the work would be working on local campaigns which also speak to our national strategic campaigns already, and linking those up together. So sometimes we'll have a national campaign around something, but it also would affect a local group, so we'll get the local group to campaign around it because it speaks to the national strategic campaign. And then at some points, it may be using those established links we have with community groups just to deepen support for our national campaigns as well, because we've now built that coalition of people who want to fight back against bad housing. So I said that was in a nutshell. It's probably quite a large nutshell, but that's community organising.
No, that's brilliant. And I can see in the chat people are interested. We've got some questions to ask you at the end. But yeah, it's definitely, like you say, giving power to the people, and it's real grassroots stuff, isn't it? So why is it that community fundraising is so important, and why is it really important at shelter?
Yeah, of course. So what to context, what we've done is we've put community organising into 4 areas over the last year or so, or a little bit longer in Manchester where it was piloted. But we have an organiser here in London, an organiser in Bristol, Manchester, and in Birmingham. So these are the 4 locations we've put in so far. And to a bit of context of why it's so important. I mean, in London, and these figures may be slightly outdated because it gets worse every week, unfortunately. But in London, we have 230 households on the waiting list, across London. Out of that, only 588 homes are made available. Oh, sorry, in Newham as well, there was, out of that, 25,000 just in Newham on the waiting list, and out of that, only under 600 homes were made available that year. So you see the height of the problem that exists in London. Bristol as well has its similar issues as well. They've got 11,500 people on the waiting list 2 years ago. In April of that year, only 20 properties were available for people in the waiting list to bid on. So again, there's acute housing issues in all these areas, similar in Manchester as well. But I'm sure you'll hear more about some of the issues in Manchester as well, with our other speakers. But yeah, again, similar issues. There's over 80,000 people on the housing waiting list in Greater Manchester, and the issues when there's so many people on the waiting list is they're not waiting inadequate housing much of the time. They're waiting in inadequate housing, and find it very difficult to make that housing better because some of the sort of things are stacked against them. And it's a similar issue in Birmingham as well. Birmingham have got 15,000 people living in temporary accommodation, which is actually 1 in 73 people in Birmingham are living in temporary accommodation with these statistics. So these are people who are living in unsafe, unsecure, and unsuitable housing, but often don't know their rights, don't know what they can challenge, and don't know what they're entitled to. And sometimes you do deal with these on a case-by-case basis. Of course, we have our hubs and our services and our casework teams, but what the organising side of it is to also look at it from another approach, which is, what can we do if we bring these people together and sort of look to demand change and really highlight what the issues are and how it's affecting large numbers of people, and also for the people that it is affecting, letting them know that they're not alone in this situation. So bringing these people together, having that solidarity, it's really, really important. I mean, sometimes with the organising, even when, hopefully we'll always be able to have an effect, and a really good effect, but even when sometimes, your campaign might not have that desired effect, at the very least, what you've done is you've brought together 20, 25 people who all have similar issues, who now have people to talk about with that, people to trade tips with, and also just feel that they're part of a community. So, it's all about affecting change and seeking change, but a lot of it is also just about bringing the community together, because just in that, you get power by knowing that you're not alone in this situation.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thanks, Titan. I mean, Amy just said in the chat that the figures are shocking, and they really are. I mean, there's so many more people needing homes than there are homes for people to go to, and the amount of people who you said are in inadequate accommodation is just absolutely awful. So that's, we do need people like you on the ground, helping these people and making sure, like you say, that they've got the power to know what to do. So, what kind of communities are you working with at the moment? What kind of people are you talking to, and what are you helping
Mm.
people with?
Yeah, of course. I mean, it can be difficult sometimes being the London community organisers, because as you can imagine, London is very, very vast compared to some of our other cities. But that's just because it's a new programme. So there will hopefully, as we are continually successful with this programme, be more community organisers throughout London. By this time next year, there'll be multiple of me, hopefully. But the main project I've been working on right now, along with other things as well, is I have a real focus on people who are living in temporary accommodation in Hackney. And the reason we're focusing on that, we have a London hub which does cover all of London, but one of our base locations is in Hackney, and an incredibly high amount of people who come to see and use our services are living in temporary accommodation, and they're coming with very much the same issues in there. And there's over 3,000 households in temporary accommodation in Hackney alone, which is an incredibly high amount. So what I've been doing is seeking out to speak to everyone, or as many people as I can, in temporary accommodation in Hackney, and initially just having a phone conversation with them one-to-one, and just asking a few questions that I've set out in a sort of survey style or an official survey. And what I do is ask some questions to really find out more about their situation, what type of temporary accommodation, asking questions about how many how many different households do you share a bathroom with, which is as high as 20 sometimes, or other issues like, I know 2 blocks of temporary accommodation that are 120 households who have one washing machine between them. So we're finding a lot of these issues coming up. And what the plan is with this project is, when we finish all these one-to-ones, we bring all these people who live in temporary accommodation together, and we really start to plot about how we could make effective change. And what's been good about the project is I'm not just reaching out to the people who live in temporary accommodation, we're also coalition building with other local institutions in Hackney who also realise this is an issue as well. And what's been really, really heartening is that so many are on board, because it's such an issue in Hackney, really, that the temporary accommodation. And I've reached out to different, local community groups or small charities or advice centres, and they're on board. They want to give me people to speak to. They say they'll put their name to the campaign. They're going to help me with the report writing, so we can, give a report to the council and say, these are the situations, this is what we want. But what's really good is, as we continue, we're getting ideas from the communities that we work with as well. They're saying, why don't we try this and do this? So, an example would be, we're going to be looking at going to the council meetings. So at the council meetings, the public has opportunities to ask questions on record, and then the council has to give sort of, on record answers back. So even that, we're training up the members of the community and the people who are affected by this to have that agency and power to ask those questions at the council meeting. And the good thing about that is, when they do this, and it gives them that power, because they understand that, hey, I can hold the council accountable here in a public meeting that's recorded, and then the council have to give an answer. The answer the council will give is largely going to be different when it's recording, has to be an open, so you get more chance of getting success. But it's these tactics and things that often people aren't aware of or don't know about, because it's not useful. It's not, they don't get promoted because they don't obviously want people to know about this. So again, all this job is about, and this program is really about finding ways to give agency and power back to the people. And really, with the organisers, we're just there, ideally in the background, just helping organise people, finding leaders in the community to take it forward. Like with our temporary accommodation action group, as we're calling it, hopefully once this is set up and we've got a group of residents who are all organised, I can step back, because it'll become an entity in its own right, and then look to organise another temporary accommodation action group in another borough somewhere else, and we can start to build that coalition of people who want to fight back against poor housing, really.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like, even just like you say, it's a very big area, London, and you probably need more people, but it sounds like you are already making such a difference to those people in giving them the tools to know when their situation is wrong, and know how to get out of it. Um, yeah, so absolutely amazing. So what sort of issues are you really sort of seeing on the ground? So I know you've mentioned a couple.
Mm.
Um, but are there any others that you're sort of seeing, or that are really common, or?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the things that has come up Loads and loads actually, especially since the new situation, the new way of living, and everyone being obviously indoors a lot more. Especially at the start of lockdown, was digital exclusion. And what I mean by that is people who had no access to the internet and no access to the devices that will let them get on the internet, which is actually so much more of an issue than even I could have imagined. So again, in Hackney, we have many hostels here that don't have Wi-Fi and don't allow you to install your own Wi-Fi. There's some rules around certain types of temporary accommodation, which even though people are in temporary accommodation nowadays for 2 or 3 years, sometimes a lot longer, where they're not able or allowed to install their own Wi-Fi due to certain restrictions. And this has always been an issue and something that has always been talked about in some regard. But now, it's a real big issue. You've got children who can't do their homework, can't revise properly for the exams or whatever it may be. People can't apply for their jobs when they're stuck in the temporary accommodation, or can't seek alternative accommodation because they can't access any internet to do so. Or even just the simplest point is families who are now stuck at home, and it can be quite difficult to keep 3 children or 4 children occupied as a single parent if you've got no internet in the property, and it's something that has come through so much. Again, it's something that we're working on in Hackney, and we have made some headway where there has been some assurances given that they are looking at Wi-Fi provision across the board, across temporary accommodation. But right now, just as far as I can see, more than half of the temporary accommodation has no access to Wi-Fi. Never mind people in their own accommodation who may well not be able to afford it. And then we hear anecdotally stories of people getting phone data, and they're not being able to afford something else, even as important as food. But it is understandable when you're so desperate to need to be able to connect, especially in the modern world. And that's not the only thing that sort of been brought to the forefront, I guess, since lockdown as well. I mean, overcrowded accommodation again has always been an issue, but it's something that we do get a lot of concerns about now, and it's something that we are also very concerned about now. So, overcrowded accommodation, people feeling very cramped, people having no space, especially families as well. It's always tough when a family of 5 are in a 2-bedroom property, but it's especially tough when you're in a 2-bedroom property and you can't leave the house for 3 months. So these are the issues we're sort of seeing now that are really heightened by the current situation. And then obviously the last one is just the massive risk of eviction that so many people are facing now because of not being able to afford rent. The eviction bans getting slightly extended but not sort of ratified. There's just a big worry at the moment that we're very close to a sort of cliff edge where there's going to be a high increase in evictions and potential homelessness. So yeah, there's sort of issues you're seeing at the moment.
Wow, yes, there's a lot going on. And honestly, Ty, the work that you and the other community organisers across the country are doing is incredible, and it's going to make such a difference to people's lives. And I really look forward to seeing how that sort of grows and how that's going to help people. So thank you, Ty. We'll probably have some questions for you in the Q&A at the end. And I'm sure it's been really useful to for everybody to hear from you. So thank you very much. Now, next we have got Liz Norris, who is joining us from Manchester today. As I said, she's a service manager in Manchester and works with our entrenched rough sleeper service, her and her team. So Liz, I mean, we would love to hear more about what you do. Could you tell us about the service and about what your team does, please?
Yeah, sure. Morning, everyone. So I'll keep it as short and simple, and that isn't patronising, but I appreciate people usually want to ask questions, so I'll keep it quite short, and you can ask those questions later. Essentially, in January 2018, we launched a new project, which was a pilot. I'll start off by saying that I hate that word because it shouldn't be a pilot, it should just be. And when I say we, Shelter were commissioned to deliver this pilot, which was aiming to help people who are currently or were currently sleeping rough in Greater Manchester. And we had funding for 3 years, which brings us to the end of this December, to help people stop living on the street, essentially, find them accommodation and help them with every single other issue that they have so that they would keep that accommodation. So it isn't just a case of, hi, we're Shelter, we're going to find you somewhere to live, bye-bye. We stay with those people for as long as they need us. Now, it's a 3-year funded pilot, but I'm here today to say that shelter will stay with those people as long as they need us. Which reverts to my original, I hate the word pilot. What do? Leave them? Anyway, I'll come back to that. That's my personal rant. And essentially, what is it? So there's something called a social impact bond, commonly referred to as SIBs. And people on this call who are financial experts may articulate this better than me. But the way I explain it is the government said, do you know what? We're going to give you some money to sort this problem out, but we're going to pay you back. So payment by results. So put the money up front. If you get the outcomes that we expect, we'll pay you later on. So where do we get that money from? So we get social investors who come forward, and there's a syndicate of social investors that have come together and said, we're going to put all the money in, Shelter will do the work. If Shelter get the outcomes, the government will pay them back, and they get some commission probably as well, and then they put that back into a new social project. It's kind of it in a nutshell. Obviously, it's never that simple. That's how it's funded, okay, the boring bit. The real work happens on the ground in Greater Manchester. So on day one, as a service manager, I had to recruit a team. So what we have is a team of engagement workers. And engagement workers are, if you like, support workers. And we got a list from every local authority in Greater Manchester that we worked in of people who we know to be sleeping rough. And literally your job on day one is you go and you find those people. Now, if you can imagine sat somewhere in a waiting room or just public transport, and you're approached by a complete and utter stranger who says, hey, I'm here to change your lives, it isn't always reciprocated well. And we are not naive or arrogant to think that that's how it would work. So it takes time to build a relationship with people. So we would go on outreach on the streets and we would start to talk to people. Now, we'll say we would know some of these people already from using our services or other services, or just from Shelter in Greater Manchester. The difference with Shelter and other outreach services, and there are, and there's local authority outreach services, etc. in Manchester, is that we are a trusted brand. And that's because we're a voluntary relationship. So we're not the police or the local authority coming out to say to people, you can't beg here, you can't be here, you must move on. We're there because we want to. And people know that. And they'd say to us, we have red lanyards that we wear with our ID, and they would say when they see us, oh, you're from Shelter? Okay, I want to speak to you. What can you speak to me about? And I'm trying to just demonstrate what the day-to-day job is. So that was the very start, January 2018, go and find all these people. Ask them if they want support. And the whole ethos of this project is, we will help you if you want it, how you want it, when you want it, where you want it, and we will go at your pace. And that is what is unique. It's a USP. It wasn't, you must do this by this time, and you will do this, and you won't do that, and you get 2 chances and you're out. You tell us what you want, and we'll help you. It's never been done like that before. A lot of projects are funded, and as we all know, they've got deadlines and outcomes, and don't get me wrong, we had targets as well, expected targets. But what we never did was really care about those targets. And actually, I can say that aloud now. I normally whisper that, don't worry about the targets. Our funders, you know, they care. The reason I don't care now is because it is July. We have 5 months left of the funding on the project. And I'm here to tell you today that we superseded every single expectation and target that was put to us. There's 8 of these around the country, pilots, and Greater Manchester Shelters one has superseded and is the best performing one across the country, and it's been held up as good practice. Now, that's not me blowing my own trumpet or the team's trumpet or Shelter's trumpet. It's evidencing that if we do things that people want, how they want it, where they want it, it's truly person-centered, it's truly wraparound support, person-led. So what do that person want, not what we think as a society should happen? It works. And I get asked a lot, how come this project has worked so well? Well, it's not rocket science, we just care. We just care about people, and we see them as human beings, and we think about what they want and not what we think they'd want. So if I fast forward to 2.5 years, we have worked with 260 people. Out of those, 180 are now in their own social housing tenancies. And without giving you too many numbers, 58, I'm looking at me stats below, 58 are now after superseding 2 years. So not everybody moved in January, it didn't happen like that. So it's obviously over the course of time, we worked with people, we gained their trust, we helped them, we found accommodation where they wanted to be. And most of those people have sustained, and we will continue to support them. What happens in between is all that other work with that engagement worker, that support worker. Everybody on the project suffers from mental ill health. 99% of people have some form of addiction or dependency, drugs or alcohol. Every single person on the project has suffered trauma. the common question I get asked is, why do people become homeless in the first place? And you could break it down into so many different reasons, and Tyrone has talked about things before, and my colleagues will. But what is apparent with everybody is a relationship breakdown. Now, that can start from a child, and what I mean by that is we have so many people who have been in care their whole lives because of that relationship breakdown in the family home. Then we have people who have had relationship breakdown with their partners in couples, and then they end up through one thing or another becoming homeless. And on that journey, they can become addicted, or they can lean to drugs and alcohol to help them, or their mental health totally deteriorates. But fundamentally, a relationship breakdown somewhere in the family home, or later on in life, with an adult in a relationship, is a common thing. And the one thing that really hurts me is that we can do all these things for people. We can get them help with their addiction. We can get them help with their trauma. We can get them therapy. We can befriend them in terms of having a befriend group of volunteers that we have. Talk about that separately later if you want. But we can't give them love. And actually, I say that because it's really important for us all. The royal we here today, but also shelter, is that we can give people love. And that's the bit that's really hurtful. So what we can do is try to help them gain that confidence, self-respect and dignity back that they don't have a lot of the time because they've been sleeping on the streets for years. And I mean for years. Is to help them understand that you are important, you are valued, and there are people who will care about you and love you. And often, when we say often, it's not true actually. Sometimes we do get family reconnections. So it could be, I'll give an example of someone who fell out with their family years ago and just spiraled and ended up street homeless. They might have children who grew up to be teenagers who didn't want to be associated then with them. They're embarrassed, or the stigma. And then we can help to mediate to bring those families back together, so they then go back and present as someone who's recovered. And I'm using language that's quite clinical. I don't mean to. We're just trying to give an overview. And we have had people who have been reconnected with families and find that love again. And that's really the best thing for me. So you can give people a home, you can help them with their addictions, you can help them with their trauma, you can give them every type of support in the world. But to give them love in some respect, or help them to see that they are cared about, is the ultimate aim. And listen, we're all humans, and I'm confident, I don't know everyone on this call, I'm confident we've all been hurt and felt sad and lonely, and had times where we sat, I'll speak for myself, just crying and don't know what to do, and felt the whole world's against me. And I can speak for myself, I'm quite lucky that I found someone or people or family that can pull me out of that and support me until I get through it. But what I needed was time. But can you imagine, before this project, I'm still not having that person to go to, that unconditional support. What do? Well, you just revert back. You just revert back and you do whatever you need to do to survive, and it's survival. So I don't like talking about the stats too much or the funding too much. You can ask me all the questions later. What I like to do is show people, just all to really think about what it means. Imagine sleeping one night on the street, not having anybody really that you can trust and rely on, wondering what everyone's thinking about you walking past, not really knowing what you're going to do tomorrow, how you're going to eat, what if it rains, what if it's boiling hot, sunny, where do I go for shelter? And then feeling lonely on top of that. So it's horrific, but try and make it positive. Like I said, there's 180 people who now are in their own homes, and we do have peaks. So people will go in the accommodation, we will support them, we will help them, we will spend a year and a half, 2 years. They become sober, and then what happens? You get this dip. So if you've been under the influence, if you like, for years, and you found help, you find sobriety, what then happens is you start to get your feelings and emotions back, and all that trauma that you suffered, which may go right back to your childhood, abuse, exploitation. We hear some horrific stories, and I won't be graphic here, but you can imagine the type of stories that we hear. It comes back. It comes back. So you now have your own flat, you have support, everything that you need in terms of services, but what's inside you is absolutely crushing, and that's when we see dips. And I'll be honest, we've had 8 suicides over the course of this 2.5 years, and they've all been people who have been in accommodation. And then we think, what have we done? But, you know, that's a subjective statement, but that is the case sometimes. And it's important for us all to realise that we can only do so much. But what we need to do is that prevention thing. So it goes back to what Tyrone was talking about as well. We need to stop people being in a situation that when that relationship breakdown happens, that they end up in a temporary accommodation, which isn't temporary, and it's a shithole. I can't say it any other way. That they just deteriorate, and that they get to a point where they end up sleeping rough, or they think there is no hope. Because if you don't have hope, you have nothing. So what we need to do as a society is to stop that prevention bit, and that's a really important part of shelters work and of all of our work here on this call. So I know I joked before in the chat saying we are an amazing team. We are an amazing team. And I say we, I'm talking about us, everybody here, because you care. You wouldn't be here if you didn't care. And it's not rocket science. You just have to really care and think, if that was your family, if that was you, would we do anything different? We also have a peer mentoring scheme that runs alongside, and there are volunteers who have been there. So people who I've just talked about, who have slept rough for years, trench rough sleepers is the term that we use. So everybody in this project has been sleeping rough for at least 2 years. The longest time we had somebody who was 17 years. 17 years. We had someone who was a victim of the Windrush. He was thrown out of his house. I get really angry when I do this. He's fine now, he's doing great. And then some people come back and say, I want to help, I've been there. And they come back and they volunteer with us, which is really warming for us. And a lot of our staff team, so 50% of the people that I recruit, and I include myself in this, I slept rough when I was a teenager. I'm okay, don't worry about it. It was a long time ago as a rebel. I've slept rough. So when I talk about lived experience, about whether you've been subjected to that sort of lifestyle, whether it's that you've slept rough, you've been homeless, you've lived in temporary accommodation, you've been a victim or a perpetrator of domestic violence, you perhaps used drugs and alcohol or dependent, and 50% of our staff team have lived experience of one form or another. So the team I've been very lucky to be able to recruit such a team of people because they're passionate. And HR might kill me for saying this. I'm from HR on the call. So I don't really care too much about what's on your CV. When we interview people, you see it in their eyes, you see it in their aura, you feel it, that they care and they want to help. And that's the kind of people that we recruit at Shelter, and certainly the kind of people I love to work with. And why I like speaking at things like this today, because I know that people care. I won't go on too much because I know Daisy's on a time limit, and I know there might be questions. So that's kind of it in a nutshell. But take the positive. There's 180 people today who 2 Christmases ago, you and I stepped over when we came out of the pubs and restaurants and didn't really know what to do. And that's not criticism, because the truth is, it was Christmas 2017. Liz got very, very drunk. That's okay, right? And I went home Christmas Eve crying, and my husband was like, will you just stop it? You can't save the world. And I was like, but Nelson Mandela, if Nelson Mandela said that, where would we be? One person can change things. To which he just thinks she's on it again, because I do this, I'm very emotional. And I woke up and I just thought I need to do something. I was just guilty. I felt guilty. How come I'm going home to my family? And I couldn't. And I saw this job advertised. I thought, I'm going to go for this job in Shelter. And imposter syndrome, when I got it, I was like, shit, what am I going to do? What a mammoth task, because our target was 131 people, by the way. So it totally superseded. But my manager asked me at the time, why would you want to do this job? And I just actually said, and he still says it to me, that's what we need. Like, I prefer to try and fail than to not try at all. So yeah, I'm telling that story because I'm just like everybody else in this call. I'm not an expert. What does that mean? Or, we're all great in Shelter. We are, but I'm just someone who cares and just wanted to do something. I didn't know what else to do. So I feel privileged and humbled to be able to work with these people, and I've learned so much from them. And they teach me so much, and they keep me grounded. And I live my life to the max, because I could be that person one day sleeping on the footpath because of a relationship breakdown or whatever else. So that's all I'm going to say for now. I've not looked at there's any questions there. Over to you, Daisy.
So right, we'll get to questions at the end. But thank you, Liz. I mean, it's just amazing the work that you and your team are doing, and I know from colleagues in Manchester that it's something that anyone who works in the Manchester hub is really proud of, that service. And I can see that you are so passionate about it, and I imagine your team are too. And and it's just, yeah, it's the wraparound care that's important, isn't it? It's not just getting them accommodation, it's helping them with all areas of their lives. And it's just, yeah, it's just amazing work that you're doing, and I can imagine it probably does take quite a toll emotionally, I can imagine. But yeah, but it's yeah, it's absolutely fantastic. So thank you so much for coming along and sharing what you do with us today, because yeah, it's definitely a service that we're very proud of here at Shelter. And we'll definitely have some questions for you at the end. I can already see some coming in the chat box, but thank you.
No problem.
And next up, we're going to talk to Lyndsey, who I think has been able to join us on the phone. We've had a few technical problems this morning. In fact, over the last 4 months, we've had a few technical problems. Let's be honest. I'm sure you've all experienced it too. But Lyndsey, are you there?
Yeah, I'm here.
Yeah. Hi, Lyndsey. Hi.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining
Hi.
us. So as I said earlier, before you got here, Lyndsey works as part of our Time for Change project. She is one of our peer mentors and has been since 2019. I'm going to let her tell you a bit more about it. So, Lyndsey, how did you come to be involved in Time for Change?
I met William up at a food bank in Pennycook, and I got involved from there. I started off helping with the Time for Change questionnaires.
Right.
We were going out into the community. I first started with the protest at Parliament for the lock changes, and then on the same day we went through to the prison to do visits as well. And not long after that, I got involved in the night walk that was in Edinburgh to try and raise awareness.
Amazing. So
I love it.
You love it, yeah. I've heard from my colleagues up in Edinburgh that you are absolutely fantastic at it as well. And
thank you.
really sort of helps make a difference to people who are going through sort of similar situations that you had yourself. So what does it sort of mean to you to be involved, and why did you want to get involved?
I was in temporary accommodation at the time before I bought my house, and I just started my recovery journey. So I was lucky to find shelter at the same time, because I found something that I was passionate about and that I could get involved in, and I've continued it since I got into my house, and I came here in January.
Right, brilliant. So you've got a house now. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
And did Shelter help you sort of get to that point?
I done it myself.
You did that? Brilliant.
But I found out about Shelter when I was at the food bank, and I heard about the questionnaires, and I took it for there, and I really enjoyed it to start with, and I've just loved it ever since.
Oh, amazing. And the work that you do is obviously changed quite a bit because of coronavirus. So can you just sort of talk us through like what you were doing before coronavirus, and then how that's changed since, and how you've had to adapt?
Before the lockdown, well, just before lockdown started, I'd started my triage training in the office, but I'd started my college work as well, but that all stopped at lockdown. And there was myself and another peer volunteer were taking food out to the street to give people lunches and see if we could help them to get them into temporary accommodation.
Yeah, so it's obviously you've had to change quite a lot, I imagine.
Yeah. But the saddest thing to see is I met somebody one day, and he had a lot of health issues, so he found walking really hard, and he was still quite young. And when we took him down that day, he wasn't getting any help. And it was sad to see how lack of help there was for services.
Yeah. So it's it can probably be quite difficult, I imagine, sort of coming across people and trying to help them and making sure they've got all the information they need.
You see people that aren't getting helped, because my dad passed away in 2007, and it's still the same group of men and the same misuse issues that are happening, and they're getting put into temporary accommodation, but they're not getting the services.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like you do sort of get involved in so much. So you do quite a lot on your own, don't you? But also with other peer mentors, is that right?
I do it with having volunteers, but I've found some people have needed referrals put in, like domestic abuse cases that have been family related, that have been able to put a referral into shelter, and
Right.
that's come out successful. She's now settled with her kids and happy.
Oh, brilliant. Brilliant. So it must be so rewarding for you, I guess, when you do get to that point where people are settled and
It's nice to see her happy for seeing her the situation that she was in, and I
yeah.
didn't think at first that shelter would be the place that she would ask me to help her to go to, but it's the one that worked.
Oh, brilliant. Well, I'm pleased to hear that, and I'm sure you see many people end up in much better situations because you've been able
Yeah.
to talk to them. And do you think it sort of helps people, I guess, maybe
Just
open
having
up?
somebody to talk to.
Yeah, having somebody to talk to and
It's-
somebody that they know who's been through sort of a similar situation. Do you think that makes a big difference to
It
them?
makes them more calmer because they're not thinking when we're walking up that they've got to get judged for who they are, because
Yeah.
when me and Michael are doing it, I've been through homelessness off and on since I was 18.
Right. Yeah.
So they ken that we know how it feels. It's not just a lot of
Yeah.
judgment people feel when they're on the streets.
Mm. Yeah. No, and they know you're not sort of just saying, "Oh, I know how it
No.
feels." They know that you actually have sort of been there yourself and can sympathise
Lived
with that.
experience.
Yeah. Yeah. And do you find that sometimes that sort of makes it easier for you to be motivated and have that passion because you know
It's,
that you're in a good place now and that you
I'm
want to help
all,
people?
yeah,
Yeah.
I want to change things for other people, because when you go into the council that day to declare yourself homeless, it's humiliating.
Right.
And sometimes I've personally seen a younger person than me go in first, and she was offered just the church floor in Edinburgh, and she was hysterically greeting, but there was no, the lady in the office wasn't comforting her, and she ended up walking out. And I feel that there's a lot of people that aren't maybe as strong to carry on and keep doing it, and they didn't get offered the help, and they just end up going downhill.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's
Well,
sad.
yeah, it's sad, and it sounds like you are doing a fantastic job, and I've been told that you really do get involved and do so much, and it sounds like you do really
Mm.
enjoy it, and it sounds like it's brought a lot of good stuff to your life. And
It's changed my life.
yeah,
It's made me a better person as well, and it's helped me get my life back on track, because I've got that positive thing that I do when I'm not spending time with my daughter. So I'm always busy,
yeah,
apart from lockdown.
yeah, especially with lockdown, yeah, and yeah, I mean, I bet it's probably that sort of made it even more real, I guess, and more important to you now that you've got a
But
home, being in
going
lockdown.
out in lockdown though, as hard as it was to see some of the things, it makes you even more driven to keep going out and doing it, because there's not a lot of people out there that do the same work as shelter.
Yeah,
Especially not the police.
right, yeah. So it's probably that people are very fortunate to have people like you out there who can help them, and who can connect them with shelter. And it sounds
Yeah.
like you're just a good ear, as a good person to talk to, and sometimes
Well,
people just
my nieces actually asked me if she can come and volunteer, because I looked after her for a long time, and now she's got to be going to college and uni. She wants to find an interest, and she's asked to start doing it as well, because she's seen how much I've changed through doing it and getting myself settled.
yeah. Yeah. Oh, brilliant. Well, I mean, we've got some people saying in the chat that well done to you for sort of getting involved in this and helping to make other people's lives better.
It's
So,
it's the best thing I've ever done. I say it all the time, but it really is.
oh, good. Well, I'm so pleased that Shelter could sort of be involved in helping with that, and we're so pleased that you've come along today to tell us about what it is you do.
Thank you.
and how you ended up there. So we might have some questions for you at the end. So we're
Okay.
going to do a bit of a Q&A. So we'll see if anybody has
Okay.
any questions. But thank you so
Okay.
much, Lyndsey, for coming and telling your
Thank
story.
you.
It's brilliant. Thank you.
Thanks.
And thank you to Liz and Tyrone as well. So I'm going to open up for questions from the floor now. So does anybody have any questions that they'd like to ask either Liz, Ty or Lyndsey about what they've spoken about, or if there's anything else you want to know about? And if not, we will go to the chat. No? Okay, so there's a few questions in the chat. Feel free to pop some more in the chat if you do think of any more. Roz, have we got any questions from the chat?
Yeah, we've had quite a few questions come in, which has been really good.
Amazing.
Tyrone Dave was asking about how the transition from like face-to-face services and like virtual meetups has been, and like what kind of difficulties has been around that.
Yeah, that's a really good question, because it's been a bit of a journey actually moving to the sort of virtual meetings, and you know, a bit of a difficult journey at first. And I thought at first I was mainly thinking, you know, the negativity of it. You know, it's much more difficult having to meet virtually and meet online, and it's going to make things harder. And then as time's progressed, it really has actually brought quite an opportunity, because with the digital digital meeting, you know, there is still some anxieties around sort of using the face-to-face, using the virtual meetings, but of course there's never any like impetus that people have to use their cameras or anything. But one of the things that's been really interesting is the people that we can reach out to that we couldn't often reach out to before, and what that means for how we're going to work in the future. Sometimes with the meetings that we have, you know, so be a group meeting at the office, or maybe another community center that we have, it's not always the most accessible, and maybe we wouldn't even realize that until we're in this situation now. But we're finding that people can often attend online meetings who maybe couldn't have, you know, taken a half an hour trip to the office or to the community center for a myriad of different reasons. So if anything, finding that we're able to reach into sort of farther corners than we were able to before, especially as sort of the situation is prolonged and people get more used to, you know, using this type of technology. So it really has been quite interesting for that. And even for when we move back to whatever the new normal is, you know, if we were ever to go back to just face-to-face meetings all the time, I'd actually think we'd be missing an opportunity now, because there's people who can only reach the other way. So I'm not even sure what the solution is to that completely, but it means that in the future there will always be a bit of both, because yeah, I've really understood the value of online digital meetings, because yeah, there's definitely people who are much more engaged now than they ever would have been if we always sat on meetings or in our office in Hackney or wherever else. So there's been disadvantages too, because yes, there's certain people who would come to those meetings who've not been able to come to the digital ones, and it definitely means that we have to look at offering some kind of joint package moving forward. So it's been really quite eye-opening for that, and it's definitely given more opportunities now, when at first I thought, oh, this is going to be a really tough situation. So yeah, it's been quite revealing.
Nice. It's good to hear that it's also had like some positives to it, and I think everyone's been sort of finding that through lockdown, like changes in way of working, like how we can carry them forward. So it's really good to hear that yeah, you're able to do that as well. We also had a question about, do you have any examples about what like sort of bad, like what is bad housing, some examples of what that can look like and what that is for people like living in it?
Yeah, so I mean, there's so many different examples of where it could be, but I guess because I've worked for Shelter for a long time, so I've started on the helpline. I've done sort of casework services, both over the telephone and then face to face throughout London as well. So I've seen a number of the different issues that people face. And I mean, I alluded to overcrowded accommodation earlier, but that really is that really is a large issue right now. You know, we're talking often families sharing bedrooms, you know, or single parent families sharing bedrooms with their children, you know, or living in one room studio flats, you know, a single parent and two children, which is awful at the best of times. But you know, in this current situation now, they are really struggling. I know our family support team in Hackney has been inundated with these kinds of cases that are coming through, because people are really struggling. So that's something that is really highlighted with bad housing. And there's been I mean, there was a report by Inside Housing not too long ago actually, which showed that in the areas with the highest rates of overcrowding were also the areas with the highest COVID-19 mortality rates. So it really, just show that bad housing, overcrowded housing is an issue. And then it's not only that, housing conditions as well. I've seen so much over the years of people living in incredibly poor housing when it comes to just, mold all over the walls, really bad damp, leaks in the property, the carpets coming off the floors, and, all sorts of things that are really quite difficult to resolve. And was really difficult at the start of lockdown as well is a lot of these repair works that are well outstanding anyway just weren't getting done, and the excuse obviously was then they can't get done because of lockdown and everything. So you're finding people who are not only in their homes all the time, maybe in overcrowded situations, but then they're there and something doesn't work, the taps don't work, or the things are falling apart in the property, and then they're refusing to come and fix it. It might well be valid reasons, but it doesn't take away from the fact that they're living in quite tough situations. So, those are some of the biggest things that have been coming through at the moment with sort of the poor housing, really.
Wow, yeah, it sounds like it's sort of a real variety of issues, but yeah, some awful accommodation people living in. So thanks for giving examples of that. Ros, did we have some other questions in the chat box?
Yeah, we've got a couple for Liz as well. Liz, what are some sort of typical problems that you face when you're first sort of trying to engage with rough sleepers and trying to build up that trust and that relationship that you were sort of talking about at the start? What are those typical challenges that you might come across?
Yeah, so people will have had negative experiences in the past with services. So if you imagine it's your first time ever having to go to a local authority, so you're homeless, so you go to the local authority, the council. Traditionally, and still, you walk into probably a big hall, loads of people, there'll be queues, you have to take a ticket, you've got to wait your turn. You already have that anxiety. You may have an addiction, so to sit still or to have to wait in a queue is really difficult. And what often happens is people are told that they have to hear their name and number, or they'll miss their turn, and people fall asleep, and there's security guards saying, "Wake up, you're not allowed to sleep here," even though they might have slept on the street or been on the street all night. They have a really negative experience of services, and they can't think that a service is a service. So one of the challenges initially when you're approaching people on the streets is obviously we don't know each other, and we've just been told who they are and where they might be. So you're having to guess, is that person? Is introducing yourself, and then they just see us as, oh, here we go, some more do-gooders. Oh, the council is you're trying to move me on, please, and try to explain that that's not who we are. So that's the first challenge, is to sell yourself and actually build that trust with people, because they have had such negative experiences. And I'd like to say that's uncommon, but it's actually the commonplace that going to present as homeless, as someone said before, it's I think it was Lyndsey, it's quite demeaning and demoralizing. No one ever wants to say, I need help. Most of us don't like asking for help. We shouldn't feel uncomfortable. We do. It's just human nature. So when then you're going into a very, what can be described as a factory conveyor belts with all these other people who you don't know, the experience is really negative. So that's the first challenge. And then the challenge after that is really basic things like, where do I meet you to talk? Will they turn up on time? A lot of the time people don't, because they're not used to following a 24-hour schedule, getting up 9 to 5 and then going to sleep. A lot of people who sleep rough will stay awake all night because it's safer for them. There's some horrific crimes that happen to people who are sleeping rough. They are targeted. They are targeted individually by people who are prejudiced, who attack them, spit on them, urinate on them, rob them. They are targeted by criminal gangs who exploit them, inject them while they're asleep. So they wake up, having been injected with heroin. They want them to be addicted. They want them to be their drug runners. This isn't a movie, this happens. They are exploited to enter into prostitution rings. And all that stuff happens a lot in the nighttime, unfortunately. So people will stay awake at night and sleep in the day because they will go into a public space. And it's why you often will see people in the daytime in populated areas, because they feel safer there. We know that lots of people go and sleep in the airport and the train stations because it's 24-hour security and they feel safe, or safer, I suppose. Do you ever feel safe? So the trust is the thing, and encouraging people to, to let us help them on their journey is a big challenge. And then all the things that come after that is the practicalities about getting appointments. So someone would say, yes, I would really like actually to start a methadone script. I am on heroin, but I found it really difficult to come off, but I would like to. Trying to get an appointment where you're told you've got 15 minutes slot, don't turn up, that's it. So we've had to do a lot of culture change and system changes, and we work, a part of my role strategically is to speak to all of the services in Greater Manchester and say, I know you're busy, but I need you to be flexible. So, if I've got Daisy who's asking for help, and it's the first time she's asked for help, and I'm here to support her. If she rolls up an hour late, I need you to be flexible for me. So we in Greater Manchester are lucky that we've built really good relationships. We work really closely with other charities, and they're helping us to do that, because that can be the obstacle sometimes. So Daisy, if you use you as an example, who might have said 10 times in 10 years, I want help, I want help, and I want it now. Daisy ain't going to wait around for someone to come and find her and bring her. When you need help, whether you decide in that moment, or you accept or acknowledge or ask for help, that's when we need to react and not say, oh, it's fine, Daisy, but come back in 6 weeks and I get an appointment. We've lost them then. So the systems that surround everything are a challenge, as well as the relationship. I could go on all day, but the resource is another one. Like I said, we were targeted 131 people, and we start with 200, more than 200. So our caseloads are really big and stuff like that. So obviously more people, more money, more time would help. Yeah.
Thanks, Liz. I think we have got another question for you, I think. Is that right, Roz? Oh yeah, I can see one here asking what sort of practical support do you offer to people with trauma, addiction, PTSD, anxiety, and what sort of emotional support do you offer? I know you mentioned that you do all of that, but have you got any sort of examples of that?
Yeah, what I will say is that we are not psychologists, psychiatrists, medical professionals, and we make that clear from the beginning, and that's a good thing, because they need someone else to do that piece of work with them. So for example, if you disclose something to me that's happened, how do I deal with that? Do I open that can of worms and then pretend that I can counsel you? So don't get me wrong, we support people, and we do train our staff to a certain level, but often when someone discloses something, they feel embarrassed then maybe, and they disconnect again. So it's good that we have an external person and people. So what we have done is employed a mental health social worker on our team, and she's seconded from Greater Manchester Mental Health Services. The reason why we did it like that is when this project is finished, or regardless of the project, Greater Manchester Mental Health Services exists in its own entity, so they can continue to get that support there. But they're employed in our team so that, like I said before, we get that instant response. So if Daisy says to me today, I really want to talk about my mental health and I want to get some therapy, I can immediately deploy our mental health worker to do that work. And she will then make further referrals and break through those walls to get to a psychologist, psychiatrist, whatever they need. We have a budget. So it could be that it's bespoke. So somebody might want to do group therapy, that's fine. Somebody else might hate the thought of group therapy, so we can pay for individual sessions, CBT, so cognitive behaviour therapy, counselling, specialist intervention, whatever that might be. So we have a budget that we can do that with. In terms of question, and then trauma-informed approach is something that we do across the team as well. So secondary trauma. So like I said, if someone's this close to me and they have many horrific things that have happened, and to the team more than myself, because they're the people do the work day to day, we actually internally then have reflective practice. Not all across shelter yet, but our team have it. And I actually fought and got a little bit of a budget to get additional external support for the team. And again, that was how they wanted. So some people wanted to do group therapy. Some people just want to speak to somebody. Emotional freedom technique, tapping. I don't know if anyone's heard of that. So we do that for the staff. The original question, it's like what the person wants. So if someone has trauma, they all do, in different guises, how do they want to deal with that? So we don't say, well, we've got this, and if we don't have it, we source it.
Thanks,
Sorry,
Liz.
Jade.
I think we have got more questions in the chat, but unfortunately we're sort of running out of time. So what I might do is ask you for just a brief answer to those, and we can email them out to people. Because it sounds like people want. I mean, there's things that I want to ask you. It's such an amazing service. It sounds like you cover so much. So thank you. And so we are going to have to wrap up now because time has gone so fast. Absolutely fantastic things that we've heard from our speakers. Thank you so much to Liz and Ty and Lyndsey for giving up their time today to talk to us about what they're doing and the impact it has on the work we do at Shelter. So thank you so much. I feel like I've learned a lot, and I hope that everybody who's joined us today has as well. So thank you very much, and we hope to sort of do more of these type things again in the future. Thank you, and everyone enjoy the rest of your day wherever you are. If it's like where I am, it's lovely weather, so go and enjoy the sunshine.
Thanks everyone. Thanks for the good questions as well.
Thanks a lot. Bye bye.
Thanks everyone. Do email us if you need any more afterwards, or yeah. Thanks, Tyrone.
Bye.
Bye.
Just make sure everyone gets off the call okay.
Yeah, do you want to stay on for anything or?